Hello and welcome. My name is Cara O'Sullivan, and I serve the Boston College School of Theology and Ministry as Assistant Director of Continuing Education. Thank you for joining us. It's nice to be able to gather with you in person and with our online audience via live stream. A special welcome and thank you to our institutional partner for this event, the professional and continuing education team at the Carolyn A. and Peter S. Lynch School of Education and Human Development. Boston College is a large school, and it's nice when there are opportunities to collaborate with others across campus. So thank you to David Goodman, Mookie Manili, and Darby McKinn for your partnership on tonight's lecture. As part of the mission of the School of Theology and Ministry, our continuing education program offers an array of enrichment opportunities to foster Christian faith and promote lifelong learning. We do this with on-campus presentations like this one, as well as online courses, webinars, videos, podcasts, and other resources for personal enrichment and professional development. Our STM online Crossroads courses are wrapping up for this semester. Our Summer 22 courses begin in July and are now enrolling. Courses include spiritual practices, teaching religion to children, and St. Mary of Magdala. Please visit our website, bc.edu/crossroads, for more information on our complete course offerings and how to enroll. We have 2 remaining lectures this semester that I would like to briefly highlight. Next Thursday, April 28th at 6 p.m., we'll host a webinar featuring STM's own Dr. Jane Reagan as she presents Women's Voices in Practical Theology. And on Thursday, May 5th, please join us in person or virtually as we celebrate the launch of Texts Less Traveled, Exploring Hebrews, the Catholic Epistles, and Revelation, the latest book by Reverend Thomas D. Stegman, S.J., Dean and Professor of New Testament here at the Boston College School of Theology and Ministry. This lecture will be held at 6 p.m. Eastern Time in the Cadogan Alumni Center, just across the parking lot from this building. Information on these upcoming programs and webinars will be included in our follow-up email. We hope you're able to join. Thanks to our presenters for granting us permission to videotape this presentation, including the conversation portion. We're so grateful for the opportunity to extend the life of this lecture. Within a month, you'll find the video posted on our Encore archive at bc.edu/encore. Bookmarks with this web address are available on our side table. They look like this. As mentioned earlier, during the program, there'll be an opportunity for conversation. There are 2 points to keep in mind. First, before you ask a question or make a comment, please wait for the microphone so the video can pick it up. And second, please know that if you do ask a question or make a comment, it will likely be part of the final video and may have a very long life. So just be okay with that before you ask your question. For those joining this lecture virtually, please post your questions and comments using the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. My colleague James will be able to share your questions and comments during the Q&A portion of this event. Now I invite Dr. David Goodman, Associate Dean for Strategic Initiatives and External Relations at the Lynch School of Education and Human Development, to introduce our speakers.
Thank you very much, Cara and Megan and James, and to our wonderful partners at the STM. Indeed, it is very lovely to be collaborating on a program of this type, and one, I dare say, that has particular relevance for what many are experiencing and what most of us can relate to at this time. So just thinking about the title for a moment, the word responsibility conjures a significant amount when one considers the many zones of pain that we see in our present world, and as we weigh our place in relationship to it all. The word burnout is something I hear daily. The great resignation and other tropes common to our tongues at the moment are manifestations of a type of doneness, overwhelm, and evacuation of meaning that many are experiencing. So seeing these two brought together tonight under the careful thoughts of our speakers should, I hope, invite us into some important and pertinent reflection and learning. So with no further ado, let me introduce our speakers for the evening. Professor Eric Severson is on the faculty at the Department of Philosophy at Seattle University, one of our sister Jesuit institutions. His area of specialization has to do with the work of the philosopher Emmanuel Levinas, and you'll see him playing with some of these ideas tonight. Eric earned his doctorate at Boston University. We do not hold that against him. And an MDiv a decade before that. He has been teaching at Boston College, actually in the Woods College of Advanced Studies for the last 6 or 7 years, and is quite a beloved teacher there. I've known Eric over the last decade and have found every excuse I can gather to work with him on projects. We've edited a few volumes together, and I can tell you he's an absolute mensch. Some of his own scholarship includes books such as Before Ethics, which was published just this last year, Levinas's Philosophy of Time, and Scandalous Obligation. I think we're in for a treat as we hear from him this evening. Sister Rosemary Mulvihill is a recognized and adored leader in the greater Boston area and beyond. She is a co-founder of Sacred Threads and brings a background in education, pastoral care, and counseling. Sister Rosemary has worked in campus ministry since coming to Boston from Australia. With a great interest in women's spirituality and a special concern for those who are searching, struggling, or feeling on the fringes of their faith communities, Sister Rosemary welcomes opportunities to help provide connections and create opportunities which might nourish women's souls. Over the years, I have come to know of the work of Sacred Threads from some dear friends of mine who have been deeply inspired by the work that it is doing in the world and its investment in the lives of women. So I've looked forward to hearing from Sister Rosemary myself tonight and have this opportunity to get to know her a bit in person. So with no further ado, let me hand the mic over, well, you already have a lapel mic, to Eric, and we'll get the program underway. Thanks for being here.
The lecture topic for this evening is burnout. The purpose of my talk is to demonstrate that the popular contemporary frameworks for thinking about energy and burnout, particularly in the US, are built on a poisonous philosophy of the human person and a bankrupt model of truth. I'll be presenting an alternative way to think about truth, inspired by the Jewish Sabbath practice and the philosopher Emmanuel Levinas. And then I'm going to seek answers to some of the problems of burnout that with a much more communal and earthy philosophy in mind. As a philosopher, I can sometimes fall into some heavy jargon, but this is a general audience and a broadly relevant topic, so I'm hoping to avoid being too nerdy. This is my second opportunity to speak in this lecture series, so I'm thinking of this topic as something of a sequel, or maybe just a second chance. In November of 2020, I discussed technology, particularly the way our tools shape us, and the often unseen ways that modern tech transforms those who use it. That lecture utilized the Jewish story of the golem, a creature from folklore that originates in medieval Prague. I'll be returning to that story today for a related meditation on the modern problem of weariness and burnout. After retelling a couple of different versions of the legend of the golem, I'm going to turn my attention to competing models of truth and their influence on the way we think about our humanity. I'm mindful also that we're awarding some continuing education credits to psychologists this evening, so I'll also attempt some practical connections to psychotherapy. A slide with the image or two of the golem. My friend Philip Cushman introduced me to this tale, the Jewish legend of the golem, and he's been a generous guide and mentor to this goy, that's the Yiddish word for Gentile, as I've been speaking, thinking, and writing about this story for a few years. In the 16th century, during an escalating era of anti-Semitic violence, legends arose about the magical ability of some rabbis to form an animated clay humanoid that could come to life and protect the Jewish community. As the legend goes, the chief rabbi of Prague, a man named Judah Loew, heard rumors about an impending pogrom targeting his people. Pogroms are organized ethnic massacres against Jews with genocidal intent. In the days of Rabbi Loew, they were directed against Jewish communities that were not permitted to have a standing army for their own defense. In the face of impending violence, Rabbi Loew walks down to the river Vltava and shapes the clay into a giant creature. With prayers and incantations and rituals, the golem springs to life and provides life-saving defense against the advancing mobs. In one version of this tale, the golem is given the name Joseph. To activate Joseph, Rabbi Loew would inscribe the word emet into the forehead of the creature. The Hebrew word emet is very difficult to translate into English, Most of the time tonight when I use it, I'm just going to say emet, because once we translate it into English, we're already inflecting it in certain ways. The simple translation of the word is truth. So it's truth written on the forehead of the golem. But this is a misleading rendering. The term means something much closer to faithfulness. When the word emet is etched into the forehead, the golem Joseph is active and ready for labor. He is used by the rabbis for other duties besides just defending the people. He can clear fields, tossing boulders out of the way of the plow. He can help raise the walls of buildings or pull them down. He joins the villagers in the work of building and nourishing the community. The most important rule for using the golem is that he must be deactivated on Shabbat, the Sabbath day of rest. He can be rendered inert with a simple trick, just effacing the first letter, emet, that's written on his forehead, the silent letter, aleph, taking away the aleph, and he's rendered inert. Without the aleph, the first letter, emet becomes met, a word that means dead person or death. But again, that translation isn't great because this word met implies the inert, the clay, the not living, the earth, the passive waiting. Truth as faithfulness is the inscription that vivifies this creature, brings it to life. Death as inertness returns him to restful waiting, to passive clay. The fourth of the 10 commandments is insistent and detailed. On the seventh day of the week, people must rest. Animals must rest. Land must rest. Even tools must rest, hanging quietly in the shed. No fires are to be lit. No furrows are to be plowed. No journeys undertaken. Nothing bought, nothing traded or sold. The golem, part machine, part tool, part animal, part human, must also rest. To deny the golem rest on Sabbath is a violation of the earthy emet truth of this creature. The rabbi must remember to efface the aleph, to wipe it away, before sundown on Fridays, or the creature will continue to work on to Sabbath day. One Friday, as the legend goes, the rabbi forgets to deactivate the golem, and he works on Sabbath, continuing to faithfully toil. At first, this seems productive and helpful. The people rest and the machine works on. But this labor is unfaithful to his earthy emet nature, this restless work, and the golem begins to lose his orientation and stability. Eventually, from working on the Sabbath, the golem goes berserk, throws boulders, wreaks havoc, knocks over buildings, and in some versions of the legend, murderously rampages the countryside. His emet, his truth, is peace-loving, agrarian, defensive, and gentle. My son, who's 12, plays the video game Minecraft, in which there's a golem character that carries around a flower. His nature is kindness and care, and he embodies the gentle earth from which he is formed. But left to work on Shabbat, he is uprooted and unmoored. Violence and unhappiness result. Only with great effort and significant injury to himself does the rabbi finally efface the aleph on his forehead and turn the golem again inert, realizing this tool is too dangerous. The rabbi Lo retired the golem's body to the synagogue, where it remains to this day, according to the legend, stored alongside retired copies of holy writings. The last time I lectured in this series, I turned from this story to the problems and promises of technology. After all, the golem is techne. Finding in this legend an alternative, then, to the Luddite rejection of technology and the technophilic love of everything new and technological. Here in this story are lessons about the restlessness of modern tech. Our digital tools, they turn us restlessly back to activity, productivity, entertainment, and the ceaseless pursuit of more. This evening, as I turn our attention toward weariness and burnout, I want to present one additional version of the golem folklore as told by the Rabbi Isaac Singer. Singer tells of a golem created to serve and protect a Jewish community, but the rabbi gives the golem a bunch of side gigs as well, having him move boulders in search of a special treasure. When he finds the treasure, the rabbi asks the golem to lift the boulder that's covering some gold, but the golem refuses. As he realized that he has successfully refused a command, the golem gains a sense of autonomy and independence and sets out on his own, destroying obstacles in his path, falling in love, and challenging the powers of the world. The line crossed by the rabbi in Singer's retelling is greed, the intervention of money. Technology that was meant to enrich and protect, the golem's technology, is turned into something deeply dangerous in this moment. Consider for a moment what might have driven the rabbi to use the golem to mine gold. The power of gold is not found in access to more goods, even if that's what it promises. The rabbi in this story already had everything he needed. Gold would instead provide him with resources superior to his neighbors. The golem thrives when he plows fields, defends the defenseless, carries flowers, and constructs dwellings. These are his innate, his nature, his truth. But when his energies are turned toward the production of capital, he finds that this endeavor grinds against his very nature. The golem thrives when his work is turned over with immediacy, without debt or remainder, to the community. Money, on the other hand, creates a gap between the work and the enjoyment. Work for stored riches is a violation of his emet, and perhaps yours too. The golem freezes in front of that boulder that covers the cash. Moving boulders is what he's designed to do. The truth of his being, his emet, involves precisely this duty. But now his labor is directed toward the accumulation of an inedible, cold, universal symbol of power and privilege. This grinds his machinery to a halt. It breaks him loose of his moorings, uprooting him, and his rampage turns him away from the faithful expression of his existence. There are several ways to talk about work in Hebrew, but the word for the work of the golem is avodah. This word means both work and worship, and is commonly used to indicate the cultivation of crops. The golem is created for an earthy sort of flourishing, an embodied avodah, in which work is turned with immediacy toward others, toward community, and toward God. With this story before us, I want to explore the way that emet truth word functions in this legend. That word is, that the world is awash today, as David mentioned, in burned out workers is hardly a controversial claim. And if you were drawn to this talk today by your own teetering on the brink of exhaustion or burnout, then you're hoping that there is some help to be found tonight. I can't promise that I have that to offer, but I can spend some time with this concept in Jewish philosophy and theology, with emet, and then turn toward the modern problem of burnout with some alternative conceptions of work and rest and time. What is the truth of a human person? Is it possible to name any center that holds, any foundation or centerpiece or core to our humanity? Philosophers have long sought this kernel to the human condition and fought bitterly with one another over it. Are we rational creatures, primarily, whose most human moments occur as we contemplate advanced science and mathematics? Are we at heart builders and makers and inventors whose greatest achievements, most human moments occur when we construct majestic things? Are we individual souls wandering about in trapped bodies that hold us back from spiritual perfection? Are we animals in search of survival and pleasure, and therefore living our best lives when we achieve the greatest amounts of these? I can list philosophers who have inclined us to think of the core of humanity in all of these ways and many others. Or perhaps there's no center that holds. no philosophy of the human person that is adequate to address the very heart of humaning everywhere and across time. For all the trouble it causes, I think it's worthwhile to continue to seek answers to this question. Of all the many things it means to be human, what matters most? Before returning to the Hebrew concept of emet, let me offer a very different and much more popular way of conceiving of truth, one that descends to us from the Latin term veritas. The concept of truth in English has been deeply influenced by this Latin conception, veritas. Maybe you've heard the word before. The Latin concept of truth is not primarily rooted in the earth, like emet, but packaged up neatly for transferability, cleaned off. It's uprooted from place and time and origins. For Latin speakers, veritas insinuates correctness, frankness, clarity. We even get some modern words from this Latin root, like verify and veracity. That which is veritas true is available for universal, synchronous, rational verification. Veritas thinking is useful. It's helped us Westerners with science, accounting, engineering, mathematics, and physics, and accurate programming, and more than I could list in a whole night of talking. These are all good and necessary things. I'm not proposing that emet truth and veritas truth actually operate in opposition. In reality, there are two different ways to think about how something can be true. To be emet true is to move from the ground upward. The rabbis in the Mishnah even point out that the word itself is built firmly with a firm foundation, like a tree planted in the ground and remaining planted there as it pushes faithfully upward. Truth as emet points to land, family, connections between persons, and the unique and diverse way that people share and shape their lives together. Truth as emet begins in contemplation, in passivity, in waiting, on Sabbath. And it attends to nature, to a nature that gently pulls toward work that strengthens bodies and communities. Truth as veritas is important too. It is veritas true that human beings shouldn't consume mercury or drink hemlock or neglect to consume vitamin C or protein. It is veritas truth that gives us Zoom and penicillin and lasers and algorithms and kids who can subtract 5 from 3. The common convergence of truth that transcends material reality is important and valuable and useful. But should it define what it means to be human? There is a veritas answer to this question, what does it mean to be human? And it inclines us to elevate and privilege certain modes of human experience. We are organisms, composed biologically and chemically. We are legion, and our numbers require mathematics and calculations for our resources and our governance. We're rational beings, capable of converging on ideas no matter where we're from, what our native language might be. And this capacity is true and important and useful and good, but I think maybe it isn't the best way to state what matters most about being human. To seek the truth in the mode of veritas is to look for that which can be extracted from the ground and washed clean of it, like a diamond from a mine. It matters not where the veritas of the diamond comes from. A diamond is a diamond, wherever you take it. Likewise, the truth of an isosceles triangle remains identical wherever it is drawn or built or contemplated. This approach to truth is intoxicating because it synchronizes and stabilizes a world with overwhelming diversity and difference. Who first realized that parallel lines never intersect? The question is mere trivia. What matters is to know that such an idea is true, veritas. In the Latin mode of truth, goods can be commodified. Goods that can be commodified are superior to those that cannot. That which springs from the earth for a farmer can be exchanged for money, and that money is more useful for universal purposes than vegetables. It is difficult to pay an electric bill with green beans. Once the beans are traded for money, the money becomes truer than the beans, according to Veritas. Once money is the beans, with all of the particulars distilled away, the diamond that can be carried anywhere, regardless of its origin. There is an updraft to this way of thinking, which carries people away from the land and toward the high rise, away from the beans and toward the cash. In her beautiful book, Belonging, A Culture of Place, Bell Hooks writes of the importance of agriculture for Black Americans, particularly in the southern states. She identifies the poisonous idea of racial uplift, which encourages Black folk to emulate the culture and habits of affluent white people. This force pulls people not just away from land, but also away from the organic and interdependent spaces of solidarity and healing. Hooks points to the restorative power of her ancestral connection to the land as the road to collective healing. Hooks also reminds us that the machine of American history has relied on uprooting all along, violently displacing indigenous people to make space for national expansion, violently uprooting people from Africa to make them slaves on the stolen land, and then repeatedly uprooting Black families from land and community. The veritas of hegemonic power lies in money, in the control of production, and in the consolidation of power. For Hooks, resistance, solidarity, and healing are possible through the, quote, restoration of our relationship to nature, unquote. This is not principally about learning how to grow vegetables, though that helps. It's about resisting the alienation of the productive process. It's about power and a truth that emerge from the local community, from the earthy places of communal connectivity and responsibility. MasterCard has a version of its product called the Veritas card. It's a special card designed to make it as easy as possible to transfer cash and credit anywhere on the planet. I just found this yesterday. I thought it was a perfect example. What a perfect product name. How inconvenient it would be for me to carry bushels of beans around the planet to trade for plane tickets and pizza. What is the value of some object? We find out by putting it on the market and seeing what it sells for. That makes its value verified, or by comparing it to other similar objects that have been bought or sold. Veritas, truth, never rests because it's not alive. Its potency is limited only by the degree to which a person has laid hold of it. Veritas is unlimited and unbound and transferable. The flesh that holds this cash truth is unimportant. These days, our cash isn't even cold and hard. It's digital, existing only in codes, completely bereft of anything like the beans that we traded to own it. There is an investment firm, found this one yesterday too, called Veritas Capital, which specializes in investing in the technologies that run our governments all around the world. Veritas views the earth from orbit, from satellites, from truth that transcends bodies and beings and love and care and relationships. Veritas MasterCard and Veritas Capital, these are not people who care about you or me, or people who care if we get burned out by our labors to achieve a slightly larger portion of what they deem valuable, true, or real. Central to my claim tonight is a philosophical point. Language is epistemic. This is a claim that was once controversial, but it's now more widely accepted. In short, this just means that our ways of understanding and interacting with the world are shaped by our native languages, by the languages we use to think the world that we live in. People who speak Spanish also think the world in Spanish. And there are some powerful examples of how people tend to view the world differently through their native languages. Spanish, as an example, emphasizes events over the people who cause them. When observing a car accident, English speakers tend to focus on the driver who is at fault. Spanish speakers are more inclined to remember details about the accident itself, but be fuzzier on who is at fault. Now, that's the way the language shapes the processing of the same event. This is not a trivial difference, because people who speak Spanish are more likely to be activated to help the people who are injured in the accident. This activation of people to help is encouraged by the very structure of the Spanish language, a language by the structure of a language that worries more about suffering and less about culpable parties. Language is epistemic, which means we know the world through the languages that we use to experience it. I can't fully explore the significance of this here, but it leads me to advocate for vigilance. English, if it's your first language, like it is mine, has trained you to be observant in certain ways and negligent in others. If you are taught to think truth in the inflection of veritas, then you've been tilted by your very language away from the dirt and toward the dollar. Don't despair, but that's the news. This is scary. It's a scary concept that language is epistemic because it means that ableism and racism and sexism and other scourges on our human existence are sometimes supported by the very language we use to think, let alone speak. I bring this up here because how we think about the truth of the human person will shape how we work as human beings. And how we work as human beings will determine whether or not we become overwhelmed and weary and burned out. Now, the legend of the Jewish golem is agrarian. It's organic and earthy. He springs from the clay and returns to the ground when his work is done. His rest, though, is not about recovery from the work week. It's not why he's deactivated, to charge up or something. He's not resting for the work week ahead. And these are, in fact, the rituals of the Jewish Shabbat are designed for the emet of the community. It's a day of rest in which all debts are ignored, all work is suspended. To the maximal degree, the functional and productive mechanisms of the week are placed on hold. When a rest is taken for the sake of work, it is the work that drives the meaning of the rest. Let me say that again. When a rest is taken for the sake of the work, it is the work that drives the meaning of the rest. But in Shabbat practice, on the other hand, the day of rest is what gives meaning to the work. This isn't a day off, but the day in which the meaning of life itself is shaped. What it means to be human is not found in the labors of the work week, but in the meaning of Shabbat. What do Jews do then on this holiest of days? They face one another. Like the deep roots of prairie grass, they entangle their roots in communal meals, in shared rituals. This produces a day of waiting, a suspension of entertainment, and busy production, and plenty of time for conversation, for listening, for arguing, for seeing and hearing and feeling one another. The emet of humaning is not the high achievements of veritas capital. The event of humaning is found in the face of the neighbor, solidarity, care, and responsibility. This is in fact the claim made by philosopher Emmanuel Levinas, whose work led me down this road. Levinas claims that this ethical relation, this summons of responsibility from the face of the suffering other, is philosophy's first word and humanity's primordial concern. To be human is to be bound in solidarity, rendered responsible for the joys and the needs that we find in the face of the other person. Veritas truth offers instead escape, freedom through cash and power from one another, from needs and responsibilities and obligations. But for Levinas, this is a freedom that divorces us from our very humanity. Veritas truth turns us away from our neighbors and their need, pressing us to look for happiness in success and wealth, and perhaps achieved the rest that is a reward for those who have accumulated enough veritas capital to be waited upon. What is promised in veritas mode is a type of freedom. freedom from need, freedom from responsibility or insecurity, freedom from care for others, and from obligation to anybody or anything. Such a freedom is not just an unrealistic fantasy, it is an empty freedom. And we are socialized to seek it, even as it coaches us away from the earthy, rooted truth of our humanity. As the conditions of our labor become more desperate, the need to exploit and extract as much as we can for our relationships, the land, our bodies, is increasingly pressing. In other words, the situation is dire because our labor, even when we wish to turn it toward community, care, responsibility, etc., occurs in the context of a crushing system in which culture and economics and entertainment all conspire to point us away from that place where our humanity resides. Nurses and social workers and therapists and teachers and counselors and helpers everywhere know well this pain. They are pulled between their care and the systems and structures which turn their compassion into mechanisms of profit. This leaves us living a self-focused and reptilian life, turned away from neighbors and toward the glorious real that is wealth, security, stability, independence, and the avoidance of responsibility. Like plants, we are pulled up from our roots toward this sublime, toward the unlimited wealth and power and fame and security, which must surely lie at the top of this ladder that we are summoned to climb. This is the great struggle that leads to burnout, at least from the angle I'm exploring it today. If Levinas is right, then we are built for community care and responsibility. This is a manner of living, of humaning, as I've been mutilating that word, you may have noticed, from which we instinctively draw meaning and purpose. But this human impulse to organize our lives and work around solidarity and responsibility runs into a practical buzzsaw when society is arranged and governed to promote rabid, ceaseless, cutthroat, the good of gold. Our bodies, like that of the golem, can continue to work without life-giving rest, the nourishment of community, the responsibility to the neighbor, but perhaps only for so long. I hear astronauts can take off their helmets in space very briefly as well. I have a dear and wise friend named Gerson Semedo. He lives in the island country of Cape Verde. We were talking this week about my topic for this lecture, and he laughed. He said, "Nobody on my island talks about burnout. That's not even a topic anyone would think about here. People here work incredibly hard, often for criminally low wages, but they find meaning in giving that work of their hands to their families and communities. They don't get burned out because they are working for one another," he told me. "And no matter how difficult the work or unfair the wages, they are nourished by one another," end quote. These people, they're deprived of so many resources, sometimes terribly, but their roots remain strong, embedded in one another. This term burnout, it comes to us as a metaphor, comparing human energy to the fuel of simple machines like oil lamps. One of the first uses of this term when I looked it up was oil lamps a few hundred years ago. Lamps have hard sides. They're not porous. They have limited capacity, and they must be replaced or replenished if they run out of the fuel that they burn. This is what people mean when they say they are burned out. They've run out of fuel to do the work that they have before them. However, these days, this term is not a synonym for being tired or overworked. It means instead that people have lost the meaning of their work. I do get tired of chopping wood for my fire sometimes, but I would never say I'm burned out of it. I feel burned out when I'm given 230 students in a single year and expected to pour my care and concern into every single one of them. It's burnout because I lack the time and resources to fulfill this charge in a way that resonates with my humanity, meets every one of them face to face. Burnout occurs when people's care is commodified and their lives turned away from one another by systems designed to profit from our estrangement. Burnout is produced by the commodification and exploitation of care. Burnout is produced by the commodification and exploitation of care. We Homo sapiens are not hard, impervious vessels with defined limits to our energy. We are more like trees or like prairie grass. I love this image, prairie grass. That's your lawn on the far left side with very thin roots that hardly can touch each other. Prairie grass, various forms of prairie grass off to the right. We're more like that. We're more like, we have deep and entangled roots with one another. Modern lawns and crops are often shallow-rooted, unconnected to one another, just like our modern communities. The excavation of prairie grass to make way for shallow-rooted corn and wheat led to the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression. The contemporary excavation of human rootedness in the land and in one another is leading to a metaphorical Dust Bowl, another depression, an epidemic of loneliness, our lives deprived of the nourishing emmet of human existence. We have limitations, of course. We need sleep, and we need food, and we need breaks, and we need holidays, but we don't burn out like an oil lamp. When we are worked away from the soil of solidarity, we dry up like weeds pulled and left to bake in the sun. Humans are humus, porous, animated earth, not unlike the golem. We are of the ground. We grow inside the bodies of other humans. We are given birth into a world in which we are utterly, unspeakably dependent. To be human initially is to be incomprehensibly entangled with others, umbilically connected, and then nourished and coached and taught and cared for by others. These are the roots, the tendrils, the entire system of entangled connections that constitute humaning. Competitive capitalism threatens to pull us up from these roots because time spent on justice or poverty or oppression, on children, on the elderly, on the disabled, these are not typically profitable moments or billable hours. Veritas truth turns us towards self-fulfillment that has left behind the moorings in community and family and responsibility. No wonder we feel so bad, so burned, so dried. Loneliness is dried up roots, or shallow roots like this lawn that can't reach the neighboring organisms meaningfully. Social media offers relief from loneliness, but it's framed as veritas connections, pushing us to create and promote distilled and curated versions of ourselves, seeking some piece of the great and universal veritas truth of attention, fame, through performance and posturing. No wonder, like the golem, we rampage or despair or perish. We're being turned up from our roots, dried up without the messy, rich, earthy nourishment of responsibility and solidarity and care. Deprived or lured away from our deeper truth, the emmet of community, we are desperately thirsty. Most of the scams that people fall for, many of which target the elderly, are designed to exploit our loneliness and separation and deep desire to care for others. Cults and cultish nationalism, these appeal to thirsty tendrils of dried up roots. They seek solidarity and community and fortitude at whatever cost. What is missing when people talk about burnout is the network of humaning in which our lives are bound together in responsibility and care. This experience is exacerbated by the structures of labor in our society. Social workers, at least in the Seattle area where I live, receive some of the lowest wages among any college graduate positions. They are given way too many clients and penalized for spending too much time or energy on any one case. School teachers are buckling beneath pressure to educate children, torn between the faces of kids who need personal care and attention and the domineering curricular expectations that often estrange them from these fulfilling moments of connection with students. This is what capitalism does to our labor. It exploits all the soft spots where our humanity resides. The hard-pressed solution is to care less about our work and therefore about each other, to focus on our paychecks, good things we might do with them, to abandon hope of meaningful labor and just survive. This is my proposed answer to the question about what it means to be human, beneath all the other valid things that it might mean. To be human is to be connected, responsible, wrapped up in the lives of others, receiving and giving care. To be human is to be responsible for one another. And so in responsibility, I believe we have turned toward the emmet truth of humanity. Since Levinas proposes a radical version of responsibility, his readers often wonder if he doesn't lead folks to a despair that results from undertaking too much responsibility for the suffering of others. But this is only a problem when we let Veritas define what it means to be human, emphasizing the separation and distinctions and obligations of each one of us. If responsibility for others is the nourishment of our humanity, is it something we can have in excess? If it is a burden that prevents us from our own self-fulfillment, or a complicated maze we have to accomplish to be a good person, then responsibility is to be avoided or at least limited. But if responsibility is the foundation and nourishment of our humanity, then there is no such thing as an overdose. Skipping some of the heady philosophical work to fortify some of these claims I've made, work that's been inspired not just by Levinas, but by feminist philosophy, indigenous philosophies, Eastern philosophy, and others, I'd like to make three concluding efforts to connect this alternative way of thinking to the modern experience of burnout. First point is about justice. The problem I've sketched here with modern capitalism is vast. The real solutions to this problem require something like a revolution in thinking about work and practices about how workers support, are compensated, and care for one another. And it calls for alternatives to the increasingly distorted world in which massive corporations and a few powerful people shape the world to secure and increase their profits. This is not a new problem, but it is one with increasingly dire consequences. Let us not forget that George Floyd was murdered for passing a piece of Veritas cash that was potentially not verifiable as authentic. The whole stability of a capitalist world requires on folks respecting, revering, honoring, and celebrating the veracity of a $20 bill. A society built on the pursuit of individualized wealth and power. My first point here is meant as a note of realism. I'm going to make a few suggestions in the next minutes about coping with and avoiding burnout when we think about humanity's emmet as responsibility and solidarity. But these are bandages and salves to help people who are already suffocated in a system that desperately needs change. So my first point is a cry for justice, for systemic change, and for the labor and activism and sacrifice necessary for these to come about. To the chagrin and confusion of those who think our humanity is found in separation and competition, labor that turns toward people who are experiencing poverty and oppression and the suffocating knee of racism, this type of labor is life-giving. There are a lot of problems on Cape Verde, but burnout ain't one. Your burnout, let me be clear, is not your fault. You haven't done something wrong. You've cared, and your care has been exploited. You've given, and your giving has been commodified. You followed your heart, your emmet, and the result has been frustration. The bottom has fallen out of your work. The joy has departed because you've been pulled hard away from the roots of your very existence, that existence in the raw, beautiful, messy dirt of human responsibility and care. So my first suggestion is that we relentlessly seek deep change in our disciplines, our communities, families, our political organizations, and our modes of economy and exchange and governance. When I suggest that you lend your energy to the work of anti-racism, anti-sexism, and other movements for justice, This might sound like yet another burden, and you're already tired. But instead, I'm inviting you to dig your toes into the soil of the earth and find there toes of others. I think there is weariness in this work, often weariness to the very bone. There is frustration, and there is anger, and there is more, but perhaps not burnout. Work for justice is work for your own humanity. The second point I'd like to make for psychotherapists and other helpers who express the problem of burnout. I have a friend who's a psychotherapist, and he reports that burnout is running strong among professionals today, especially psychologists. But it isn't fixed by vacations or by breaks or by taking less clients. Burnout is not produced by overwork, not principally. This experience is a product of systemic pressures that strain and stress and pull us away from the components of our work that is life-giving. In psychotherapy, the economic structures include overhead, insurance building, diagnostic requirements, finance situation of clients, the endless paperwork, just to name a few. All these conspire against the emmet of the psychotherapeutic encounter and the very humanity of the therapist, let alone the client. However, I think Levinas is right. Every face brings not only a burden and hurt and concern, but resources to be help in this moment. It's easy to miss in psychotherapy the gift that arrives along with the expressions of pain, anxiety, and trauma. The roots of the other person, the client, nourish the therapist. This encounter between two people can humanize both persons. This doesn't mean that we don't get tired or need breaks. This doesn't mean that the nourishment is always obvious or easy to access. Also, this isn't a recipe for unlimited energy or a way to increase one's capacity. This model of responsibility, however, offers humanity in the midst of inhumane situations. One more point about the work of therapy. It's wise to remember that clients are almost always struggling with this same estrangement, burnout, that we've spoken of tonight, alongside whatever else they bring to you. If I'm right, then the emmet of humans involves life-giving entanglement with others in responsibility and care. Every human that appears before you has roots and needs them to be connected and nourished and entangled. The work of therapy is in part to encourage the nurturing of this healthy relationship between client and the ground upon which they live and grow. Oh, I have a tree image I want to show with lots of roots. Finally, my last point. And a more general word about how all of us can sink our toes into the ground. If Levinas is right, we are responsible beyond and before all else. If the emmet of humanity is solidarity and care for the other, then our humanity will be restored and fortified by these connections. The life-giving nourishment of one's human personhood is found passively, at rest. Like a tree that waits for rain to trickle down through the soil, we receive nourishment from the humanity of others. Ironically, responsibility is freedom, life-giving, liberating. This is difficult to see in a world harried and harassed and urged toward profit and self-sufficiency. So if you're looking for ways to avoid this modern experience of burnout, I have some suggestions. Look first at the faces of children. The youngest among us have not absorbed the curse of separation or the veritas of unlimited wealth and power. Kids are often quick to trust, quick to need, quick to give. Their roots are thirsty, but they're also generous. They frequently revel in the connections they find with the humans around them. The antidote to individualism is children, but those of you who are parents know too well how hard the capitalistic system pulls us away from these roots and our kids. If kids aren't your thing, or even if they are, look also to the elderly, to people deemed by a production-driven society to be no longer of use. Look to those, the faces of people sidelined because of something deemed a disability. Look to the poor, look to the oppressed, look to the destitute, look to the widow, to the orphan, to the stranger. Build a generous economy of nourishment with these people, and you too will be nourished. Accept care and fortitude from other persons. The oppressive and cruel systems in which we find ourselves laboring can make us tired, but they cannot burn or dry us out if we continue to allow our humanity to be nourished by care, responsibility, solidarity, and love.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric, for such an incredible, compelling, and challenging talk. We'll get to now hear a bit of a response from Sister Rosemary, and then we'll be opening it up for discussion and questions.
So what does one say to all of that? I'm here, thank you for the gracious invitation to be with you, but my primary qualification is not the number of books I've written or the number of articles I've written at all. In fact, I'm here as the poster child for being overly responsible and heading towards burnout at various times. In fact, as I told some of my friends about our conversation this evening, they laughed. You talking about responsibility and burnout? You could. So, in fact, my middle name, if I had a middle name, I don't have one, would have been responsible. I'm the eldest of 4 children, so I grew up in that sort of a family. Then I've been in religious life, and both of those communities have taught me a great deal about being responsible. And that's why I'm here. I worked, as you mentioned, I think, in a number of educational and pastoral settings and enjoyed it, very, very much enjoyed it. But some years ago, when I was working in a parish in Australia, my brother observed me for a little while and said to me, "So Rosemary, I know you know much more about this theology and religion stuff than I, but I have a question for you. Didn't Jesus already save the world? What are you doing?" And it made me pause. It was a very good question, because sometimes I think I have taken on all the responsibility for saving the whole world and changing the society, and we have to do that together. I also agree with you very much about young children. We learn so much from them. And just one other small anecdote. I worked in an elementary school for a number of years, and then the following year became the principal at that school, which was a big jump for me. And one day, walking across the school grounds, a little girl in the 4th grade stopped me. I can still remember her clearly, Louise Verdouy. And she said hello, and I said hi to her, and she said, "Sister, I wish you weren't our principal." So that definitely caught my attention. And I said, "Really, Louise, what makes you say that?" And she said, "Because you used to always talk to us, and now you always run." It was one of the best lessons of my life about what really matters and what's important. I think I paused at the time, but for years since then, I've recalled those words when I've been in different situations. Why are we doing what we're doing, and what's it all about really? You know, the pulls on us every day, on every one of you, are incredible. We could be working 24/7 and feeling like we hadn't done enough. So you're very right. But we need to ask ourselves a question about what really matters, what counts. You know, your comment about, and I agree with you, the world is awash with burnout workers. What a sad statement about our world. The world is awash with burnt out workers. And burnout is about people who care. And we need people who care. But finding the gifts is often challenging. I agree with you that they're there. I've been doing a lot of work in recent years with people who ask me to do a funeral for a family member or a graveside service, either because they don't have a church or they don't want to go to a church. So it's always an honor to do so. But as you know, in death, it brings out either the best or the worst in families. So there are lots of messy situations. But we can learn a lot when we stop and listen to the people and their pain. They give us a great deal to think about. They help us remind me about what's important in life and what things we shouldn't even be worrying about. And your whole point about money is so important. You know, I've said to people 1,000 times, I'm not in this work for money, and I'm not. I don't care about money at all. I run a small non-profit, and people on my board hate me saying that because we've got to keep making some money. But money's not the important part. People are the important part. And so everything you've said tonight, Eric, I think is sort of countercultural, isn't it? We live in a world where technology was going to make life easier. Is it making your life easier? It's making mine much more difficult. You know, I sent you an email. You didn't respond. I sent it 3 minutes ago. You know, it's true. And the same with text messages. You haven't gotten back to me yet. What's happened? What's wrong? So our culture is pushing us in a direction that's the opposite of what you're promoting. And I totally agree with what you're saying. What do we do to change the way we are ourselves? And then what do we do to change our society? We are human beings. And humanity, look at the world stage at the moment. Doesn't it cry for humanity? On every level. And so the practice that you mentioned, the Shabbat practice of the Jews, is a really important one, I think. I think back to my childhood. When I grew up in Australia, on Sundays, we went to Mass, we came home, we had a big family dinner, often with extra people, and we sat around that table for a long time. There were no sports competitions, no stores were opened. In fact, I don't even think the gas stations were opened in those days. That's dating myself, of course. But we just enjoyed one another. And we're losing so much of that. Go to a restaurant now and look around, and what do you see at various tables? People sitting together, what are they doing apart from eating? Texting one another or checking their phones. So we've moved in a totally different direction. But the whole point of veritas, of faithfulness to who we are, who we were created to be, is the essence of all of this. And so you've raised some wonderful questions for us to contemplate. Some of them are questions that have come up for people during these pandemic years. Because despite its many terrible barriers and whatever struggles, people have had a little more time to reflect. And I've met lots of people who've changed their lives in various ways because of having had that time. Because reflection is so essential. And I'm saying that easily, but it's hard to do. Sometimes I need someone to turn the golem off of me because I find myself going a bit too berserk, just like that story. And we can all do it. We get overwhelmed. We need to calm it down. We don't have a rabbi to come and take a letter from our forehead. We have to do it for ourselves. So how do we do that? How will you do that? And how will I do that? There are so many situations in our world where humanity is crying. You know that. If If you took one moment, you could think of people you've met today who are crying out for love, for peace, for recognition, for being seen. And you know that phrase that's so well said but often forgotten? Wherever we turn, there is the face of God. If I could remember that in my life, I would be a much better woman. And if we could remember it, we would be a much better society. Wherever we turn, there is the face of God. I'm sure in some of the islands that you've alluded to, it's easier to see than when you're running down the street or someone's honking at you because you didn't move quickly enough in your car. We have a lot of work to do. Thank you for the challenge you've given us. You had some answers, but the answers have to come from within ourselves, I think. And they're going to take a lot of real effort on our part. So we need to begin, and I think today is a good day to begin. You've kicked us off to a good start. I don't know if you're going to come back and give us a test in a couple of months or a couple of years, but maybe you've challenged us enough to really see how we can do that. So thank you for the opportunity and the challenge and the invitation to see if we can turn our world around. It certainly needs it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Rosemary. That was wonderful. A wonderful practice that our colleagues at the STM are teaching us in this shared event is something that I have never done before, but it's actually introducing a bit of a break, which is something of maybe rubbing the aleph off of our forehead for a second so we can have some time for reflection. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 5 minutes, and that allows people in the room here to sit with a discussion prompt and maybe have some conversation with one another. And those of you that are online, I'm going to read the discussion prompts, and you should also be able to see it. Feel free to have a fun time in chat, and let's think about these things together. And in 5 minutes, we'll come back together and have a good conversation, Q&A time with our speakers. So I'll read these out loud, and this will just sort of start off our 5-minute time. Everyone has roots. If we are human in the way we've described here, and those roots offer nourishment and humanity that we may be inclined to forget or neglect. When you sink your toes into the ground of your human experience, what do you find there? Already offering you nourishment, giving you time, restoring your humanity. That's the first very substantial question. The second is, are you able to deactivate yourself? And how do you do this? So take 5 minutes, and we'll come back together at that time. All right, all. So here's what it's going to look like next. We've got about 15 minutes left, and so what we're going to do is we want to simultaneously collect questions from the audience who are in the room, and we also have someone ready to take your questions online, and those will be communicated to the speakers. So I'm going to hand the mic off to Eric, and feel free. Whatever is on your mind, what you're carrying, what you're thinking about, we welcome it.
Got it.
Whatever you like. Okay.
Now's your chance to ask questions if you have them.
Easy questions. Come on.
Only easy ones allowed. Or perhaps you have a comment based on your investigation of these questions. Yes? Yeah, please.
Well, I was struck with thinking about the question at the end of the paragraph. With what do you find there? Already offering you nourishment, giving you time, and restoring your humanity. And I thought, given your talk, that perhaps the question could be rephrased, who do you find there?
Right.
You know, friends, family, God, you know, those kinds of things. So thank you.
Sure.
On those lines, too, where do you see communal worship play into life-giving rest and Levinas's concept of ethical relationship?
Yeah. So Levinas was an observant, practicing Jew himself, and although he doesn't write much about Sabbath in his philosophical writings, he has some more religious writings that do reflect on the importance of Sabbath and rest at times. In general, I think, many of the world's religions include rituals that involve dropping what you're doing one way or another and facing one another. I'm thinking about the way my Muslim brothers and sisters, as the sun goes down today, break bread together. Like, this is not a time to be on your phones across the table. This is a time to have food. They've abstained the entire day, and in this moment are face to face. And this ritual is important. Muslims also have Friday prayers, which are a central important moment of the week. And you turn your phone off and you leave it behind when you come together to pray. And I think about the there's many different Christian practices of Sabbath. And I think about the ones that emphasize rest and facing, like Sister Rosemary in her youth, have service, have mass together, and then have a meal, which is a continuation of the religious ritual where you're facing one another in that way. And the central Christian liturgical moment is communion or Eucharist, which is literally looking into faces and handing bread and sharing the wine. These are such rich moments of humaning. So if you ask the question of the philosophy of Levinas, we gotta have some time afterwards, and we can delve into some of the ways that I connect his work to those things. But the part about religious ritual, I think that is one of the richest things offered by religion or spiritual devotion and other forms of communal practice, is you drop the work and you do the important thing that gives meaning to that work. And that's, you engage one another's faces. So thank you for the question.
However, at times people have difficulty finding a community with which to do that, and that's the important part. We need to be in community. And so we have to look around and find a place where we can be at home and feel welcome and be part of that. And so often people come to me and say, where can I go? And it's hard to point people to a group, not just a church building, but a community. And then the people inside of that building all have the responsibility, I believe, to reach out to one another.
Sister Rosemary, you mentioned getting close to burnout previously, and I'm curious to hear more, if you are willing to share sort of what pulled you back from that, and how sort of the ideas brought up tonight maybe were a part of that story or not. And then also I was thinking about the Jewish idea of Shemitah, of the sabbatical year that comes every 7 years, and the Jubilee year every 50 years, and I'm curious, how you might think about that in this context.
Good questions.
I think what's helped me at times when I felt, and I'm being a bit dramatic by saying close to burnout, but feeling empty is probably how I'd put it. And I know the theory of it. I've often supervised students and taught people about feeling a bit empty, we need to stop, we need to rejuvenate ourselves. But I have to figure out that signal within myself. And it isn't unlike the story you told about the going berserk, I'm not talking about going berserk, but just feeling like I haven't got much more to give. Sometimes I have good friends who tap me on the arm and say, you need to take a break. And I need to give myself permission to do that. I think it's, once I give myself permission, then I think those roots that are getting dry can be rejuvenated. So for me, it's about time, it's about quiet, it's about reflection. Sometimes I just like to go to the ocean for a day and look at the vastness of it all, and it picks me back up. But practicing what we preach is very important, and it's a little tricky sometimes.
Good answer. I love your question. And again, I would spend a lot of time on this one if we could. The leaving the land unused every 7th year, beautiful sort of instance. It isn't, like, we now know that's pretty good for land to rest or to have crops rotated and other things like that, but it's not an agricultural method. It's a mode of declaring the meaning of the land not lying in its production, just as Sabbath is the meaning of human life and community not found primarily in their production. But you mentioned the year of Jubilee, which is this impossible economic model where every 49 years, 7 times 7, all land is returned to its previous owner and all debt is canceled, and the economy is just this odd economic move where it's all washed clean. You can't think of a practical way that could work, because who's going to loan money the year before it's, give a loan? All of that doesn't seem like it would make much sense as a practical economic model, but that's not what the year of Jubilee legislation seems to be about. It's not a pragmatic economics. It's reminding us that the ownership is not the meaning of life, and debts, they come between our relationships. Borrowing money and having massive debts accumulated, they get in the way of our humaning. And I love that sort of ritual of, maybe it was practiced once or twice in ancient Israel, or not at all, we're not sure, but it wipes clean every debt. And that's meaningful far beyond an economic model. And so we should be giving one another Jubilee, even while we still got to do the business of life. Now, this makes it sound, because I focused on Shabbat in my discussion here, it makes it sound like you should carve out parts of your day or week or year or every 49th year or something to do something radically different. But I would want to point out that what I'm really advocating is a philosophy of time that allows for the very interruption that Sister Rosemary just mentioned. And that is in the face of a friend or a child. You're going to be in the midst of the busyness that this society and world says you have to be in order to pay your rent and find groceries and support your family and whatever else you need to do. So life is going to be busy. My lecture is not an invitation for you to join a particular religious tradition and follow their practices of Sabbath or whatever else. What I'm really after is cultivating the capacity to be arrested by the face of the other, because it seems like it's going to cost you time and money and make you late for life. But that is life. That moment when a child grabs your hand to stay and play and you know you're going to be late, that's life. What you're rushing off to matters. But what it means to be human is fortified and founded in that face that's grabbed hold of you. So that's how I think of the relationship between those rituals and what happens in terms of the meaning of our lives.
And if I could just add to that, I think behind every face there's a story. And so when a person approaches you, he or she deserves your undivided attention, even if you can't address all their issues in that moment. But they need to be seen and they need to be heard. That's a difficult enough practice in itself, because we never know what exactly they're holding. And most people are holding a lot. They're not just swinging by to say, hello, do you have a lovely day? There's something more. So we need to be opening our eyes and opening our hearts to that invitation. And it comes, at, as you said, at the most inopportune times and the most inconvenient times. They're the most important times.
The child is the rabbi offering to rub away the aleph and let you be soft clay to be impressioned by the child, by the widow, the orphan, the stranger, by the one in need, and by people whose oppression are sometimes exacerbated by the very business you're doing. This is the arrest that I think we have to cultivate the capacity to have our olives effaced. Yes?
All right, thank you for that. I'm going to share a couple of, we have a few questions here from the Zoom group. I'll try to share a couple of those. So one person asks, surely it will be so ideal to have a culture that respects Sabbath, but even this has now been counterculture. How does one convince a community to be life more giving, especially those who might find our topic foreign? So the gist is, how do we help encourage our larger community and culture to adopt these practices?
One person at a time.
Yeah, I was trying to, this is a hard question because I don't want to be facile. I really think you can be more human with every face that you allow to arrest you from veritas truth and steer you towards the rootedness of human beings to one another in responsibility. But that's it's almost a moralism if you just do it every once in a while. And, oh, that was a nice little power up I got from helping one person. What we really need is revolution of a system of the world that is crushing people and making them lonely and separated, and teasing and toying with them that they'll be happier with more stuff or more connectivity or more friends or more likes or a bigger piece of something they feel like they're supposed to climb toward. That system is the problem. So there are answers for people, whether they're therapists or teachers or counselors or nuns, who have access to ways of being human that are better. But the real problem is justice oriented. It's a society that's built for this, and that it profits from our estrangement. The more lonely I feel, the more time I spend with Facebook or some other app that would draw me to feel those fragments of connectivity that are veritas truth, that are packaged up and washed clean of people's real lives. They're not real, and yet we're pulled to them like they are realer than real. So that question, I don't have an answer to that question from this, except one person at a time is a good start, but get serious about organizing for social justice and in ways that liberate and make the world better for people who are experiencing oppression, because that really is how we resist some of these systems. And I'm not a politician about to propose a new sort of economic model or a new governmental party or something like that. But I think we need to insist and demand that our world not dehumanize us from the people who are doing those things.
Thank you very much. Another question we have, you've emphasized this need for community. What do you make then of quiet communing, contemplation, and practices of retreat?
I think that's an essential part of community, because going back to your image about roots and nourishment, once we do that individually and have some quiet time, then we are nourished enough to reach out to one another. So I think the two go together.
It sort of depends on what you're resting up for, retreating from, and what you're returning to, and how you do it, right? A retreat or private contemplative chance can be a withdrawal from humanity or a way of deepening and strengthening one's roots that is ultimately turned over to others and to community. So I think I'd like to say that there's no competition between breathing in and breathing out, which maybe that's a good way to talk about the inward pull and then the outward gift.
Not so much a question, but an observation. I've had an opportunity to become burned out a few times, and so got practiced at it. But now, being retired for a decade, several observations, one of which is that I think endemic to human nature is to be a creature of habit. And so your question about what's really important, in examining that question, it's what habits do you want to build to address what's really important? And having been in city management and trying to change the world, one city at a time, I think the opportunity really is to change oneself and provide an example to community about what's really important. In your terms, in your way.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more final question. Front row here.
Thank you. I guess in response to the question about how we can get other people to learn about this, well, I think one place to start is with our very own faith communities. I think Amet and Veritas are two ways in which we can engage our faith and our faith communities. And I was struck also by the word avoda, meaning work and worship, and it makes me think about how we worship is how we worship is that in a spirit of emet or a spirit of veritas. And I'm specifically thinking about the Eucharist. The early church, people made the communion bread that was brought to the liturgy. But today, what type of bread are we using? We're using hosts that are made through a very, Western capitalistic model. And what would it be like if we were to return to making bread, actual bread that tastes like bread, that we use within, the Mass. So that's what I've been thinking about.
What a beautiful earthy example.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, I wish we had a lot more time. I imagine there's a lot more questions coming in through Zoom, and I see it in the room. This has been really arresting. I mean, I do think that is a good word for it. It has me halting and thinking about where and how I'm living and how I want to be living. And so I hope all of you tonight are leaving with something that you could take towards your practice in daily life and the one person at a time and the nutrients of your root systems so that you can be a gift in this world. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for this wonderful partnership with the STM, and hoping you join us for the next time. Be well, everyone. Thank you.